the session. Okay, Ed.
Are you going to let everyone in?
They're all in attendees right now.
Okay.
We already have one written comment and 2 individuals that have raised their hands.
Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. This is the Public Safety Commission's forum on hiring a new police chief here in South Pasadena. We're joined by Interim City Manager Sean Joyce, and as well as members of the Public Safety Commission, and we're expecting some of the City Council to join us as well. We're going to look at 4 areas tonight to explore. We're going to look at what the professional experiences of a new chief should be, what their educational background should be, what sort of traits and personal characteristics they should have, and what challenges they'll face in the community that'll need to be addressed. We want to keep the comments sort of focused on those 4 areas to give Sean some solid constructive feedback about who will be a good fit. And I would like everybody to keep that in mind tonight is this is what's a good fit for South Pasadena. That's really our goal here. Okay, I'm going to let Sean jump in and introduce himself and explain a little bit about what we can expect coming in the future as we hire a new chief.
Thank you, Ed, and good evening, everyone. Again, I am Sean Joyce. I can describe myself as the past and the present city manager. I started my career in the city of Walnut, for that matter, but was there quickly, and then spent some time as assistant city manager and then city manager of Sierra Madre. Did a recruitment in Sierra Madre and appointed a police chief then. Went to South Pasadena, where during my nearly 8 years, I did 2 recruitments and hired 2 police chiefs over that time. I then went on to the city of Irvine, where I was greeted by an outstanding police chief, and then had the pleasure of appointing his deputy as his successor. And so over the course of my 30 years in local government, but 25 as city manager, of appointed 4 police chiefs and worked with 3 different police departments. I have the great challenge now of, on behalf of the South Pasadena community, searching for the next chief of police. And so it would benefit me greatly, and Ed and I have talked over some period of time, the great challenge that we have, but the great opportunity that we have for our next chief. And we feel great responsibility to make sure that the right candidate is chosen who best understands the community and understands the community's core values and will edify those core values as he or she leads the South Pasadena Police Department in the years ahead. So with that, Ed, I'll defer to you for what might be next.
Sure. So to keep this smooth and again constructive, if you want to speak, use the raise hand button down at the bottom of your screen, or you can submit a written question or comment in the Q&A box. And I'm going to start with John Cervantes, who submitted this comment. He says, could we have a police chief that is similar to a former South Pasadena police chief? For me, that would be Arthur Miller. He was one of my favorite South Pasadena police chiefs. Anyone that is similar to him would be a good fit for the job. So following on that comment, that kind of leads us right into professional experience. I see that Bianca Richards has her hand up. Can we have Bianca speak?
Bianca, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, hi, everybody, this is Bianca Richards. Ed, remind me, what question are we on?
Well, we were talking about professional experience, but if you have something else to contribute, I know you had your hand up pretty early, so just jump in.
Yeah, so professional experience, I would like to see somebody who's had some experience within a supervisory role already. And I would like to see somebody who's more local, similar to South Pasadena. And when I'm saying local, like mainly California local, as opposed to out of state. yeah, I would like to see somebody who's got more kind of experience in California. And yeah, and that's my comments for right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bianca. Let's go right to Ellen Daigle. She had her hand up early as well.
Mute.
Ms. Daigle, go ahead.
To follow up on John's comment, and I was on the Public Safety Commission. And can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, and served with Art Miller, who was absolutely an amazing police chief. And when Art left, I think we want to keep in mind that he gave his stars to Brian Solinsky. He felt that strongly about Brian Solinsky, and I think Mary Urquhart, Janet Braun, myself, all served as chair, and all would like to see Brian Solinsky be our next chief. He's an amazing person and certainly knows our community. Added to that, I think there's a huge financial benefit because we now have a deputy chief and then we will have a chief. If Brian was our chief, that would alleviate a whole salary and whole perks. So that's my comment.
All right, thanks, Ellen. Let's go on to Bill Kelly. You know, one thing I forgot to mention is if you could try to keep your comments under 2 minutes, just to make sure that everyone has a fair opportunity to speak tonight. I don't have a stopwatch running or anything, so it's not a hard, fast rule. But if you do drone on and on and on, I may ask you to wrap it up. Bill Kelly, let's hear from him.
Mr. Kelly, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to see someone who's had experience with dealing with diverse communities, someone who's had experience dealing with using social workers, coordinating with social workers to deal with outreach to the homeless and with welfare checks, and has demonstrated a commitment to that in his or her style of policing. I would like to see someone who is educated in college, in criminology or sociology, that sort of thing, rather than someone who has come up through the ranks. Someone with a master's degree would be desirable, I believe. And I could say more, and I'll write comments and file them.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Mary Urquhart has her hand up as well.
Ms. Urquhart, go ahead.
Hello, I first of all want to thank you for having this forum. We did not have any public involvement in the hiring of the last police chief, and I think it was a big mistake. So thank you so much for including the ability for us to speak. I do think that we have an additional challenge now with the police chief because there's so much controversy right now with police departments and truly what makes our city great besides all the wonderful history. It's a great school district and it's safe. We have a fabulous police and fire department, and that's why a lot of people are here. So thank you for giving the importance to it by having this public session. I do believe that experience is huge, and we do need someone that has relationships with other police departments in the area. If there is an emergency, we need to call upon those other police departments, you know, whether those individuals are friends or colleagues and there's been a close relationship established. But we have to remember that we are close to some very, very dangerous areas. And I would encourage the selection process to make sure that who you choose does have prior relationships with others in the area. And that's a point that's added to Bianca Richards' comment, saying that California, but I would go further and say it should be somebody in the Los Angeles area. That's it. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right, thank you, Mary. The Public Safety Commission, as well as City Manager Sean Joyce, felt that community input was very important, and I'm glad that we're able to do this, and thank you for coming tonight. We have a few more hands up, and then I'm going to get to an additional comment in the Q&A. Let's go to Rich Elbaum.
Go ahead, Mr. Elbaum.
Yes, thank you. Just two quick points. One, I'd like to see someone that has demonstrated experience not only working with data, but making changes in the department based on data. In a couple of years, South Pasadena, like many other cities across the state, will be required to collect and report data under the Racial Identity and Profiling Act. And this is to try and eliminate unconscious or conscious bias and who gets stopped by the police. And while I have no doubt that whoever you choose will, of course, the city will submit the data, what's more important to me is I'd like a chief that's going to use the data, share it with the public, and make changes as needed based on that data. The other point I'd like to make is that I'd like to see someone who has demonstrated experience in working closely with the community on difficult problems. Almost every police chief can show that they've had, coffee clashes with the community and all of that. That's not particularly difficult. What's difficult is dealing with complicated situations, reaching out with honesty and sincerity, and responding to various parts of the community. And I'd like to see someone that has significant experience in doing that. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Rich. Let's go right to Yvonne LaRose.
Ms. LaRose, go ahead.
There. Thank you. I am back in South Pasadena for a little more than a year now, and I'm learning a lot about the different changes that have been happening while I've been away. I would like to see a police chief who has various traits. Some have already been mentioned, but in addition, I would like, in addition to multi-ethnic and diversity awareness and equal, what do I want to say? Equal treatment among and respect among the diversities. I want to see enforcement of the laws on an equitable basis. I think I just said that, but not copying to, oh, well, that's just a cultural issue. We need to respect their culture. No, we have people who are coming to us. We are Americans, my God. We are the melting pot. We have cultures coming to us, but we also have laws that are to be applied equally and equitably. And I want to see us getting protection based on the citizen who's looking for protection and enforcement of the laws. I want to see someone who has not just textbook and classroom training on issues such as elder abuse and domestic abuse, but someone who has an appreciation of the issues and realizes that there are times when things are going into play, coming into place and about to start escalating to the point that there is an explosion of violence or harm. And we need to have someone who is aware of these things, not just, as I said, on a textbook basis, but realizing that things start germinate and then grow. I want to see, we've got a great response time as far as policing is concerned. This COVID madness has made it very difficult to be as active as I used to be before I left the city. but I just want to see equal. Some people have already spoken and touched on issues that are very important to me. Quality education, advanced education. It's going to be obvious that whoever it is going to have gone through the police academy so that they have that training under their belt. And the master's degree, the advanced degree, as far as education, is extremely important to me. And that advanced education means that they have a better appreciation of how to deal with things diplomatically and with regard to dealing with people, as well as with regard to reports and managing others.
Sure.
As well as building liaisons and coalitions with others.
Thank you, Yvonne, and welcome back to South Pass. We're going to talk a little bit more about education when we move on to the next subject, because it seems like that's something that a lot of you find to be very important. I'm going to take a break from the spoken comments and read kind of a lengthy comment here submitted by Feng Hyun. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Hello, I am writing on behalf of the South Pasadena Anti-Racism Committee, a group of more than 60 residents focused on racial justice in our city's government policy, public safety, education, housing, art, and community services. We would like the next police chief to have the following: experience with and extensive knowledge of contemporary issues in running a police department, including data analysis, transparency, collaboration with social service professionals, anti-racism, fairness, and implicit bias training. The ability and commitment to incorporate an understanding of mental health issues into policing policies and guidelines. Demonstrated experience working collaboratively with social services and mental health organizations. Knowledge of non-law enforcement responses to people in crisis, like the CAHOOTS program in Eugene, Oregon, as well as experience in police reform, dismissing and rooting out racist, biased officers, and a history of working constructively with social justice and community-oriented groups. The recruitment should include a focus on bi-POC and women candidates if possible, and a candidate who is also bilingual. At least one of the finalists should come from this pool of candidates. Okay, that's a fairly extensive list of requirements for experience. The next person who's got their hand up is Ayaka N. Can we unmute?
Go ahead, Ayaka.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to echo what Rich said about data gathering and being, I like the new police chief to be someone who's transparent and be willing to share, not only gather the data, but willing to share the data with the city council as well as the public, so that we all have access to the information as to what's happening with the department. I like the new chief to also be willing to work with different community groups and committed to having ongoing conversation with different civic groups in the community. I would also like someone to be willing to work with social workers, and like Fawn said, as someone who can get behind something like a CAHOOTS model. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Hall, you typed in a question about process and you have your hand up. Let's have Greg speak next.
Go ahead, Mr. Hall.
Seems like he's still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
There you go, Greg. Go for it.
My focus isn't really as much on the qualities that you're talking about, but the process by which we're going to be selecting the chief, because I think that the prior process that was used was faulty and was not inclusive. And so I'm hoping that and asking probably what is going to be the new process to select this new chief of police.
Sean, do you want to address Greg's question?
I should have said at the outset, Ed, and I had mentioned to you that I would, so I apologize. What I really want to learn tonight and in the days that follow, but primarily tonight, is to hear what the community is looking for in a chief and those who joined this evening, so that as I contemplate the next steps for a chief, and choose either a targeted recruitment that would seek to find all that we would wish to see in a chief, or in a different process, I would do so with the benefit of the wisdom and insight that is offered this evening. And so more to follow, but I think that the panels that were used, and what I've heard is that the panels that were used did allow for the inclusiveness of the community. I have my doubts as to whether or not that the insights offered by those panels were used, because obviously I was here when a change was made with the chief. And so I really do want to hear what folks are looking for, so that I can come to some understanding of whether or not there is an individual that was considered last time, but where the city manager, for reasons of her own, chose not to appoint somebody better identified for success in South Pasadena. If one thinks about it, a change was made at the chief pretty early on in his tenure. And so it is clear, I think, to many of us here, I don't know if it was the process failed or somebody failed the process, but I certainly think that you all should be heard, and that's why I'm here to join you to gain from your insights. I can tell you, Art Miller is a personal friend of mine. I recommended his appointment to the city manager, Sergio, at the time. Art is a personal friend and has been for many, many years. I appointed two other chiefs. I didn't appoint him, I appointed two other chiefs. So I think what I'm hearing right now is reassuring that what you're looking for is what South Pasadena deserves, and what I think that we could find for the community to lead a department during a period of transition nationally in how we police. So the exact particulars I'll decide soon after tonight, but I did not want to reach any conclusions before I have the benefit of your collective insights.
Well, Mike, can you hear me, Mr. Joyce?
Sure, I can. Sean, please.
Okay, Sean. Just to give you a open dialogue and fairness, because I think some others who are listening know this too. Art Miller and I were sergeants together on the LAPD, and we both were captains. And like you, I'm a personal friend of Art's, and I stay in touch with him over there in Peoria. And I concur with you in terms of my estimations of Art Miller. My concern really is, and I think where the fault was, and there wasn't some openness and honesty in the last process. When I asked about the screen down process, that was not answered, because you're going to get a lot of candidates. And so you can't interview everybody. So there's got to be a screen down. And so who's going to be involved in that screen down? Who's going to be involved in the oral interview process? And like, I would like to see the involvement of people from the school, from the business, the religious community, and mental health community, and so forth. So this becomes not a chief that is, it's a process by which all of the entities that have a great interest in who our chief are involved in the process in some way. So they become, in a sense, our chief, because we're all involved in the process. And that's what I'm looking for in terms of making sure that the process results in the end product that we want. And that's a chief that will be here for years and years and years, because you need that continuity. You can't have an 18-month chief. It's not good for the city. That's my final comment.
I appreciate your thoughts.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Before we move on to Matthew B., I just wanted to note that Mayor Mahmood and council members Evelyn Znaimer, Jack Donovan, and John Primoth have joined us, as well as Public Safety Commissioners, the Chair Amin Al-Sarraf, Jeremy Ding, Grace Kung, and Lindsay Angelatz. They are observing. They won't be participating tonight. I did want to note that they are here listening to your comments as well. And I'm going to go on to Sean. Did you have anything else?
I would just add, just to reinforce what you said, council members are here because they're interested, keenly interested, but because of the law, commonly referred to as the Brown Act, they cannot participate in the meeting. So it's not because they don't want to say anything, it's because this is not a publicly noticed meeting of a city council meeting. That's why.
Yeah, this is a community forum only. Let's go to Matthew B.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yes, hello, thank you. I just wanted to express my desire that we recognize, what's going on nationally in terms of our awakening to what policing has been like, and recognize that a new type of policing is necessary. And I concur with many of the speakers when I say that I'm looking for a police chief who is open to structural reform, who's willing to hand off some of the responsibilities that aren't meant for policing, like welfare checks and homeless outreach, and bring in other agencies that have more expertise in those areas. And I'd say that South Pasadena has a unique opportunity to be bold here and to find someone who's not just a good police chief in the model that we've had in the past, but someone who's a little bit reform-minded and can see where we're going into the future of policing and can sort of help us get there. And that's my comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Let's go right to John Serbalis.
Go ahead, Mr. Serbalis.
Hey, John, you're on mute. I'm not sure if you can. There
Okay,
you go.
is that better?
There you go.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thanks for having this forum. And my comment is brief. So there are obviously many qualities and qualifications to consider, but right off the top, I'd like to see the pool narrowed to those candidates who do not have a record of allowing officers to engage in a pattern of excessive force with impunity. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And Josh Albrechtsen.
Go ahead. Mr.
Unmute. I am unmuted. Hey, quick comments. I'm sure you guys will choose a great police chief. I have no doubt about that. I just wanted to talk about two of the times that I thought the South Pasadena police really let everybody down over last year, and have you guys talk to the police chiefs and see what they would do in this situation. The one time was when the guy drove the truck up onto the curb next to the Black Lives Matter protesters. And I don't even think that guy ever got arrested or had any punishment whatsoever. And when the head of the Black Lives Movement South Pasadena went to complain to the police, one of the officers said, well, we're dealing with two infractions, the guy who drove up on the street and you guys illegally hanging a sign across the light posts. And it was just outrageous to me that one of the officers did a false equivalence of that, of, okay, one was an aggressive act of intimidation. Another was a minor violation of hanging a sign where you're not supposed to hang a sign. And that was their excuse for not, that was his excuse for not doing anything about the guy who drove the truck. The other one was with the Griffin on Kinsale thing. I had no problem with how they handled it a year ago. I thought they did top of the line job. Loved everything they did. But when there was an interview about the guy being sentenced in the South Pasadena, the lieutenant who people just mentioned seemed very sympathetic to the business, saying, hey, it was St. Patrick's Day, it's the worst time to close the business. Almost all the community members I know was outraged that the business was open. And I'm hoping that, the next police chief faced with a similar situation where business is opening against COVID restrictions would actually be more assertive, even though they did a great job a year ago. I just hated the quote at the end of the article where he said, yeah, we're sorry for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Josh. So let's move on to education, which we've already kind of talked a little bit about. Is there anybody that has a comment or question about what sort of educational qualification the future South Pass chief should have? Okay, let's go to Caitlin Lainoff. Okay, looks like she put her hand down, so we'll move on. Eric Febro from the South Pasadena asks, is there a general timeframe deadline in which you're hoping to begin from the screening to interview process to ultimate hiring? How are you planning on receiving community input, and how can people continue to be involved in the dialogue? I think Sean addressed most of that, but the last question, how can people continue to be involved, I think is probably pretty valuable. Sean, is there another way that they should reach out to the commission or directly to you?
I can speak for you, Ed, because we've talked about it, and for myself. If folks have thoughts that maybe tonight they later think of a thought that they missed, let us know. I mean, call me directly. Email is probably easiest for you, and I'll get back with you. So let me know your thoughts. If you wake up with an epiphany, please let us know. Ed and I are working together in terms of how we think about this, and so I invite you to let us both know. With respect to educational expectations, I will offer, somebody could just be crazy great, but bachelor's degrees and master's degrees are the norm. You may not be impressed with me yet, but I have both of those degrees, and it helped prepare me to at least try to be successful in my career. So bachelor's degrees and master's degrees in local government are the norm.
Okay, thanks, Sean. One other thing to keep in mind for your neighbors who could not attend tonight is that this is being recorded and it will be posted to the Public Safety Commission's webpage for review later. Judith Harris has her hand up. Let's hear from her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, good. I just wrote something in the Q&A. I thought I had my hand up, but I guess I didn't on this call. So I am a licensed clinical social worker myself. I am an organizational consultant and trainer, as well as a mental health therapist and provider. And I have taught social work practice in a prestigious social work university. So I'm very abreast of a lot of the topics about equity and diversity, and also about restructuring police work. And I want to echo, first of all, some of the comments already made, like Ellen Daggle's, Mary Urquhart's. I don't think I'm pronouncing the gentleman's name, but Hung Hui's comments. I agree with a lot of the comments that were made, but I also think that it's very important that the candidate not only have education, but that the selected candidate have experience and is supportive of working conjointly with mental health professionals in police work, that the person is disclosing, open to admitting deficiencies in training and experience in areas such as working in mental health and diversity and equity, and an interest in increasing his or her education in these areas, as well as that of the entire SPDD force. I do agree that Brian Selinsky, who has been at our police force for a long time, and whom I believe has 2 master's degrees, may be an excellent candidate for this position. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Judith. But I note over in the Q&A that Bianca and Yvonne have noted the master's degree might be desirable or some law school experience. And then Caitlin, who we tried to hear from a few minutes ago, said she's having some mic trouble. And part of the education that she's looking for is extensive anti-bias training. Okay, it looks like we've kind of covered, as far as I can tell, everyone who wanted to speak about education. So let's move on to traits and qualities, which, no matter what the qualifications on paper are, we also, again, want a good fit for South Pasadena. So what are the personal traits and qualities that we would be looking for, or that would be something to consider when we have a new police chief coming in? Helen Tran's got her hand up. Let's go to her.
Hi, thanks for hosting this forum tonight. I think one really important trait for me is critical thinking, especially when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement and defund the police. I think the police tends to have a really skewed view of what both of those movements together or separate mean. And because it's such an important dialogue that we're having in the public today and also in South Pasadena, it's really important to me that the police is able to think critically about these issues and not automatically assume that these movements are necessarily anti-police or trying to, manifest like certain negative feelings towards the police. But it's really rooted in a whole entire history of policing against communities of color and in ways that produce disproportionate impacts on people. So that's a really important quality to me, is to be able to critically think about these contemporary policing issues. And another trait that is important to me is to have a police chief who's not affiliated or sympathetic with the white nationalist or white supremacist movements. This was, I think, one of the main reasons why Chief Ortiz has left his post, because of suspected affiliations with that or sympathies towards those causes. So I'll end my comment at that and leave it, let others respond.
Thank you, Helen. Michael Downing has his hand up too. Let's hear from Michael.
Yes, thank you very much. I completely support the idea of having a chief with the characteristic of being able to critically think, critically evaluate, assess the culture of the organization, and develop a strategy to move the culture forward. Our societies and different cultures are moving at such a rapid pace, and American policing is on its heels a little bit in terms of legitimacy and authenticity. And it's really crucial for a police chief to be able to bend the culture of the police organization to meet societal expectations and needs. To do that, you're going to have a transformative, charismatic chief that is able to work in a community-based government environment and listen to input and react to that input.
Thanks, Michael. I think that really goes back to the theme of what's a good fit for South Pasadena. I don't see any more hands up right now. So we can move on to the last topic, which is challenges in the community. And again, we've talked about that a little bit in addressing education and experience. And, Helen and Michael just brought up that, over the course of the last year, 18 months, there's been a substantial change in the way that people think about policing and what, future possibilities could be. What are I think maybe there's probably immediate challenges that a new chief would have to tackle, and then long-term challenges as things may change in the city and we move forward. Does anybody have any thoughts about what those challenges might be? Okay, let's go back to Ellen Daigle.
Mute. I had a couple thoughts. I think it's very important that our police chief represents us in stature, in the ability to talk, in the ability to gain respect of the officers. And as somebody who has sat on public safety? I would like to ask Sean the question because I think we had a real problem with our last police chief. Where are the boundaries between the city manager and the police chief? I think personally, and this is just me speaking, the police chief, I think, must have the back of their officers and the respect of the officers, and be able to make decisions based on his experience. What happens when there's a city manager who feels like it's okay for them to interfere, and are there clear-cut boundaries?
Do I understand you correctly? You're asking, are you asking about a city manager getting involved between the officers and the chief?
No, I'm asking a city manager getting involved in the problem solving of a police matter and directing it not in a cooperative way, but in a dictatorial way. Are there boundaries, or is that something that just happens between a city manager and a police chief?
Okay, thank you for explaining that. The ideal situation is one of mutual respect. The police chief is well aware of a paramilitary, rank in their department. The city manager, or the police chief, reports to the city manager, and so I always mention that I've never had to remind somebody who the boss is. Right? If I have to remind somebody who the boss is, there's a problem. So why would I do that? I have, for example, now I have a very collaborative relationship with the chief, and I always have. But so my deal would be if the best police chief would wish that the city manager is not interfering any more than he or she would think necessary. Let's take a recent scenario with which we are all familiar. When Richard Cheney drove through an intersection and pulled onto a driveway apron to confront somebody peacefully protesting, notwithstanding whether or not the sign was posted or there was a permit for it. That Richard Cheney was not cited, and in my view, was not dealt with appropriately. Where I would ordinarily not wish to get involved in that, and in fact, I have a long history over my time of not getting involved in something like that. If it's not done right, I'm going to involve myself in that. And in fact, those circumstances were later presented to the district attorney, and whether or not what ultimately happens to Mr. Cheney in that situation would meet with any of our satisfaction, that is properly being considered, and it remains to be seen what happens. But that matter still lies on the desk of the district attorney's office, as it were. So, ideally, again, a city manager is not managing a police department, but where I confer with Chief Selinsky and Acting Chief Selinsky and say, hey, we need to invest, in the city council is enormously supportive. We need to invest in anti-bias training in the department, elsewhere, sure, but in the department. And that's one where we work together collegially to see that happens and that we're effective when we make a difference together in seeing that training not just occur, but be successful and penetrate the very culture of the police department to a greater level than exists today. So we're both working collaboratively all the time. There are cases, of course, where just as a chief would direct a lieutenant, the city manager would, and not in a technical way, but in a leadership way, get involved with making sure that we're policing in a way that South Pasadena expects, and we're built and we're armed, small a, that we've got the tools that we need to be successful.
Great, thanks, Sean. Thank you, Ellen. I'm going to look at one of the Q&A comments from Judith Harris, contributes additionally. I would like our selected candidate to have had and be supportive of continuing training for himself or herself and the entire force in engagement practices for mental health orientation, unconscious bias, and equity, diversity, and inclusion practices. The police chief also needs to be a person with excellent relational and leadership skills, as well as education and experience in community policing. And then Caitlin adds, public mistrust of racism in the police force, lack of support for community members who do not look like them, support for mental health workers stepping into calls, redirecting towards educating community members of alternatives to policing. And let's go to Sean Meyer, who we have not heard from yet, but there are a few others who have their hands up as well.
Yeah, I'd like to raise up something that Helen Tran brought up earlier about the presence of white nationalist groups in police departments across the country, and perhaps even maybe in our city that it isn't. That I feel like in some ways the anti-bias training is great, but maybe it doesn't go far enough. That a chief should be educated in anti-bias training and anti-bias interaction with the community, but also should be up to date on groups like the Oath Keepers and 3%ers. These people that the insurrection in the Capitol, that a lot of these groups have infiltrated police departments across the country, and any police officer that is a member of any of those groups should be rooted out and fired.
All right, thank you, Sean. Let's go back to Michael Downey. He has something additional to contribute. Hey, Michael, if you can hear me, can you unmute? Okay, well, why don't we do this? Let's jump to Bianca Richards and we'll go back to Michael.
Hi, again, this is Bianca Richards, and thank you. I'm just echoing what everybody else said. Thank you for doing this. I just want to make a comment. I don't think this is necessarily a challenge, but I think a new police chief needs to realize that this is a very engaged community. We are obviously very outspoken and involved in lots of stuff that goes on in the city. We have a lot of community organizations and a lot of commissions. And I would just like a police chief to be respectful of that and to listen to all of that community engagement. And then to have a response time. So when a resident does have an issue, that there's a pretty good response time to get back to that issue, complaint, concern. Yeah, those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bianca. Yeah, and just by the folks who are attending here tonight, I think that you're right. The activism is apparent. So let's go back to see if we can get Michael. Michael, you've got your hand up. Can you unmute and? Okay, let's go to Helen Tran once again.
Hi, yes, thanks for calling on me. I'd like to give an opportunity to anyone who hasn't spoken yet, just in case they haven't gotten in queue or somehow behind.
No, go ahead, Helen.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I think one challenge is for the police chief to run a department that is part of a democratic process. I think historically, police agencies haven't been under the public eye or public scrutiny as much as they are now. I think prior to last year, a lot of people, including people my generation, millennials, people who are younger than me, they didn't realize that they could challenge the structure of the police department, including the budget, how cities fund their police departments. But we very much can, and I think that's a challenge for the new police chief, is to respond to that, is to police more with transparency and in the public eye, and to understand what it means to respond to the will of the people. So if the will of the people is to reallocate significant portions of the department, the police chief should be responsive to that.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Sean, there's one question, and I think you addressed this a little bit, but Matthew B asks, will the process of appointment be completed by you, or do you think it will roll to the next city manager, or is that undetermined as of yet?
It is my hope to be able to make that appointment before I leave. I would like for, flawed though I may be in so many regards that my wife would be happy to share with this group, I do have experience that I think that I'd like to lend to the community, versus having what I guess I was a second time city manager when I came here, but it's likely that, or certainly possible that the city manager appointed may well be a first time city manager. And I would like to, with the experience I've had, successes and failures alike, to be able to make that appointment so that we've got the right person in place for a new city manager, so that the new city manager, who will have the task of finding a finance director and doing so much else that needs to be done, that I'd like to have this done before they arrive, if at all possible.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like we don't have any more comments or questions in the Q&A. I'm going to give ourselves one more opportunity to hear from Michael Downing. Michael, if you'd like to contribute and you want to jump in, unmute and join us again.
Well, while he does it, I assure you, Mike has my cell phone, so he'll call me if he's got something that he thinks of later.
Thing. So it looks like everybody who should have had an opportunity to contribute. Oh, we got a couple more here. Okay, let's go back to Yvonne. Yvonne, you had a comment you wanted to add?
Mute. Okay, Sean made a comment about his I didn't quite understand fully. Something about his leaving, and and his making the appointment before he leaves. So I'm wondering when, I take it Sean is the interim city manager, and there's a term limit on that capacity.
The city council is conducting a city manager recruitment. I have the ability to stay through that appointment and then the time between the appointment and the person starting. And so I expect to be here, give or take, 2 more months.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sure,
Yvonne.
thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that has anything they'd like to add before we wrap this up?
I have one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
Sean, are you thinking of being a candidate for a permanent position as city manager?
No, flattered though I would be, been there, done that. And so I have, it's been a joy. Just, hearing Bianca's voice again and hearing from so many others, Ellen and Mary and so many others here. It's been great to reconnect with folks, but I look forward to passing that baton and seeing somebody just terrific come on board. And I know the city council will find just the right person for the city manager post. But I will tell you, for what it's worth, folks, I got a lot of phone calls from prospective city manager candidates. And it's funny because one of the themes was that I've shared with folks is, hey, this is an engaged community. You got to know it. And there is an an expectation that you'll respect their involvement. It's an active community. And so do know you need to be accessible. And the city council has that expectation. They've made that very clear to the recruiter. So just as you would expect of a police chief, and it's a very fair expectation, the city council will be looking for a city manager that understands the great value that an involved, actively engaged community brings to the city.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, I note that Mayor Pro Tem Cacciati had joined us. If I missed him earlier, I apologize, or he may have just slipped in later in the meeting. If no one else has anything they'd like to add or contribute, I think we're ready to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank everyone for the participation, whether you observed and listened or whether you commented and contributed. Either way, I think it's important for the community and for South Pasadena to be aware of, the fact that we're looking for a new chief and to express, again, what we feel is a good fit for the city. So at that, unless there's any last minute hands up, nope, it looks like we're clear. Everyone, thank you so much. Sean, thank you for joining us. And thank you to Tamara and Maria for organizing the webinar. And everybody have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.